The December wind whistled through the ancient stone corridors of Windsor Castle as William stood by the tall window, watching the first snowflakes of winter begin their gentle descent. His hands were clasped behind his back, a habit he had inherited from his grandmother, and his thoughts wandered to the approaching Christmas season. This year felt different somehow. Perhaps it was the weight of recent events, or maybe it was simply the realization that traditions needed refreshing, breathing new life into old customs. Catherine entered the room quietly, her footsteps barely audible on the thick Persian rug. She knew that look on her husband's face, the contemplative expression that meant he was planning something significant. She had seen it before major announcements, before charitable initiatives, and, most memorably, before he had proposed to her all those years ago in Kenya. "You're thinking about Christmas again," she said softly, coming to stand beside him at the window. It wasn't a question. After more than a decade of marriage, she could read his moods like a familiar book. William turned to her with a slight smile. "Am I that transparent?" "Only to me," Catherine replied, linking her arm through his. "What's troubling you?" He sighed, his breath fogging the cold window pane for a moment. "It's not trouble exactly. I've been thinking about what Christmas means to people. Real people, I mean, not just the pageantry and protocol we're used to." Catherine understood immediately. This was William at his best, always thinking about others, always wanting to make a genuine difference. It was one of the many reasons she had fallen in love with him. "Remember when we visited that family in Birmingham last month?" William continued. "The Johnsons, 5 children, both parents working multiple jobs just to make ends meet. The youngest, Emily, she asked me what we do for Christmas." "I remember," Catherine said. "You told her about the family traditions." "Yes, but afterwards I couldn't stop thinking about her face. The wonder in her eyes when I described the decorations, the gatherings, the abundance of it all. And then I thought about how many families like their struggle during the holidays." Catherine squeezed his arm gently. "You want to do something special this year. Idol. Something that goes beyond the usual charity appearances and donated presents. Something personal, something that shows we understand and care about what ordinary families go through." The snow was falling more heavily now, transforming the castle grounds into a winter wonderland. Catherine watched the transformation thoughtfully. "What did you have in mind?" William turned to face her fully, his blue eyes bright with excitement. "What if we opened up some of the royal residences for Christmas? Not just for tours, but for actual celebrations. Invite families who might not otherwise have a special Christmas. Make it magical for them." Catherine's face lit up. This was exactly the kind of initiative that made her proud to stand beside him. "That's wonderful, William. But you know there will be resistance. Protocol, security concerns, tradition." "I know," he admitted. "But isn't it time we created new traditions? Ones that actually mean something to people?" Over the following days, William threw himself into planning with characteristic determination. He convened meetings with his staff, outlining his vision for what he called the People's Christmas. The initial response was, as Catherine had predicted, lukewarm at best. "Your Royal Highness," his private secretary, Simon Blackwood, said carefully during one such meeting, "while the sentiment is admirable, the logistics would be nightmarish. Security alone would require months of planning." "Then we'd better get started," William replied firmly. "Simon, I'm not asking for the impossible. I'm asking for the improbable. There's a difference." Catherine, who had been quietly taking notes, spoke up. "What if we started smaller? Choose one residence, limit the number of families, make it a pilot program of sorts. If it works, we can expand next year." The room fell silent as everyone considered this. It was a reasonable compromise, typical of Catherine's practical approach to William's sometimes grand visions. "Sandringham," William said suddenly. "We'll use Sandringham. It's perfect, large enough to accommodate a good number of people, but small enough to maintain intimacy. And it's already associated with the royal family's Christmas." The logistics team exchanged glances. Sandringham was where the royal family traditionally spent Christmas. This would be a significant break with protocol. "The Queen," Simon began hesitantly. "I'll speak with my grandmother," William said. I think she'll understand. She's always said the monarchy must evolve with the times. That evening, William made the call he had been both anticipating and dreading. The Queen listened in silence as he outlined his proposal, occasionally making small sounds of consideration. "William," she finally said, her voice carrying both affection and authority, "you remind me of your mother in moments like these." She too wanted to bring the monarchy closer to the people. William felt a lump in his throat. Comparisons to Diana were rare from his grandmother, and always meaningful. "Is that a yes?" "It's a qualified yes," the Queen replied. "Use the east wing of Sandringham. Keep the numbers manageable. And, William, make it special. If we're going to break with tradition, let's do it properly." With royal approval secured, the plan began to take shape rapidly. Catherine took charge of the selection process, working with various charities and community organizations to identify families who would most benefit from the experience. She was meticulous in her approach, ensuring a diverse mix of backgrounds and circumstances. There was the Ahmed family from London, parents who had fled Syria and were working hard to build new life for their 3 children. The O'Brien family from Liverpool, a single father raising twin boys after losing his wife to cancer. The Patels from Leicester, a multi-generational household where the grandparents were raising their grandchildren while their son and daughter-in-law served overseas in the military. Each family had a story. Each story touched Catherine's heart. She spent hours on video calls, getting to know them, understanding their needs and dreams. William often found her late at night, surrounded by files and photos, tears in her eyes as she read about their struggles and triumphs. "How do we choose?" she asked him one evening, gesturing at the hundreds of applications they had received once word had quietly spread through the charity network. "They all deserve this." William sat beside her, picking up one of the files at random. "We can't help everyone this year," he said gently, "but we can start. And if this works, next year we can do more. And the year after that, even more." As November turned to December, the preparations intensified. William personally oversaw the decoration of the East Wing, insisting on a blend of traditional royal grandeur and warm, familial touches. He wanted the families to feel special, but not overwhelmed, welcomed, but not patronized. Catherine focused on the experience itself. She planned activities for the children, arranged for local musicians to perform, and even convinced several celebrity friends to make surprise appearances. She coordinated with the royal chefs to create menus that were both special and accommodating to various dietary needs and cultural preferences. The media inevitably got wind of the plans. The reaction was mixed. Some praised William and Catherine for their progressive approach, calling it a breath of fresh air for the monarchy. Others criticized it as a publicity stunt or worried about the security implications. "Are you reading the papers again?" Catherine asked, finding William frowning at his tablet one morning. "The Telegraph is calling it William's folly," he said, his jaw tight with frustration. Catherine took the tablet from him and set it aside. "Since when do we let the papers dictate what we do? We know why we're doing this. That's what matters." She was right, of course. William pulled her into his arms, grateful as always for her steadying presence. "What would I do without you?" "Probably something even more outrageous," she teased, making him laugh. As the big day approached, both William and Catherine found themselves increasingly nervous. They had put so much thought and effort into this initiative. What if it didn't work? What if the families felt uncomfortable? What if the clash between worlds was too great to bridge? The children seemed to sense their parents' anxiety. George, their eldest, approached William one evening as he was reviewing the final schedule. "Papa, why are you worried about Christmas?" the young prince asked, climbing onto his father's lap. William set aside his papers, giving his son his full attention. "What makes you think I'm worried?" "You're doing that thing with your forehead," George said, reaching up to smooth the furrow between William's brows. "Mama says you do that when you're thinking too hard." William chuckled, hugging his son close. "Sometimes, George, when you want to do something good for other people, you worry about getting it right. But Christmas is about being happy and being together," George said with the simple wisdom of a child. As long as everyone's together, it'll be right. Out of the mouths of babes, William thought. He kissed his son's head. You're absolutely right. Thank you for reminding me. Catherine found them like that a few minutes later, George having fallen asleep in his father's arms. She smiled at the sight, her own worries easing. This was what was all about: family, love, and sharing those blessings with others. The week before Christmas, William and Catherine made a private visit to Sandringham to check on the final preparations. The East Wing had been transformed into a winter wonderland. Twinkling lights adorned every surface. A massive Christmas tree dominated the main hall, and the scent of cinnamon and pine filled the air. It's perfect, Catherine breathed, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. Almost, William corrected. He produced a small box from his pocket. I had these made. Catherine opened the box to find a collection of small silver ornaments, each engraved with the name of one of the invited families. Oh, William, I thought each family could hang their ornament on the tree, he explained, and then take it home as a keepsake. Something to remember this by. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. This was why she loved this man, his thoughtfulness, his attention to the details that made people feel valued and special. As they walked through the rooms, checking last-minute details, they encountered some of the staff who had been working tirelessly to make the event possible. Mrs. Henderson, who had been head housekeeper at Sandringham for over 30 years, approached them with barely concealed emotion. Your Royal Highnesses, she said, curtsying despite William's often-stated preference for informality among long-serving staff. I just wanted to say my own grandchildren won't be able to visit this Christmas. They live in Australia now. But preparing for these families, thinking about the children who will be here, it's given me such joy. Thank you for allowing us to be part of this. William was touched. He hadn't fully considered how the initiative would affect the staff, many of whom had their own struggles and separations during the holiday season. Mrs. Henderson, you and the entire team have been invaluable. This wouldn't be possible without you. The housekeeper dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. My mother used to say that Christmas magic isn't in the receiving, it's in the giving. I've forgotten that, I think. This has reminded me. As they continued their tour, William and Catherine discovered similar sentiments among the staff. The excitement was infectious. Even the most protocol-conscious among them seemed to have been won over by the spirit of the initiative. 3 days before Christmas, William received a call that threatened to derail everything. One of the tabloids had gotten hold of the story and was planning to run it with a negative spin, focusing on the security risks and the break with tradition. They're calling it a reckless endangerment of the monarchy, Simon informed him, his face grave. They have quotes from unnamed sources claiming this is a disaster waiting to happen. William felt his temper rise, but forced himself to remain calm. Who's their source? We don't know, but the damage could be significant. They're planning to run it tomorrow unless... Unless what? Simon hesitated. Unless we give them exclusive access to cover the event. Absolutely not, William said immediately. This isn't a photo opportunity. These families deserve privacy and dignity, not to be treated like props for a media circus. Catherine, who had been listening, placed a calming hand on his arm. What if we offer a compromise? A single photographer, carefully chosen, who can document the day respectfully. We control the images released, and the families get nice photos to keep. It was, once again, a brilliant solution. William looked at his wife admiringly. Have I told you lately that you're a genius? Not since breakfast, she replied with a smile. The crisis averted. The final preparations continued. William found himself unable to sleep the night before the event. He stood once again at the window, watching the snow fall on the Sandringham estate. Tomorrow would either be a triumph or a disaster. There was no middle ground. Catherine found him there at 3 a.m., wrapped in her dressing gown. Can't sleep either. He shook his head. I keep thinking about all the things that could go wrong. Or, Catherine said, slipping her arms around his waist from behind, you could think about all the things that could go right. The children's faces when they see the decorations. The parents getting a moment to relax and enjoy instead of worry. The connections that might be made. The memories that will last a lifetime. William turned in her arms, pulling her close. When did you become the optimist in this relationship? Someone has to balance out your worrying, she murmured against his chest. As dawn broke on December 22nd, the day of the event, Sandringham was buzzing with activity. Final touches were being put on everything, security sweeps were being conducted, and the staff were preparing for the arrival of their special guests. William and Catherine dressed carefully, formal enough to honor the occasion, but not so formal as to be intimidating. Catherine chose a deep green dress that Charlotte had helped her pick out, saying it looked Christmassy, but pretty. William opted for a casual suit with a festive tie that George had given him the previous year. "Ready?" Catherine asked as they prepared to leave for Sandringham. William took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." The drive to Sandringham felt both endless and too quick. As they approached the estate, they could see vehicles already beginning to arrive, modest cars, and minivans carrying precious cargo of excited families. "Look!" Catherine pointed to one van where children's faces were pressed against the windows, eyes wide with wonder at the grandeur of the estate. William felt something ease in his chest. This was right. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever criticism might come, this was the right thing to do. As they pulled up to the East Wing entrance, they could see the first families being greeted by the staff. The Ahmed children were clutching their parents' hands tightly, eyes darting everywhere, trying to take in the magical scene. The O'Brien twins were practically vibrating with excitement, their father looking overwhelmed but happy. "Your Royal Highnesses," Simon appeared at their car door. "The families are arriving. Shall we begin?" William looked at Catherine, who nodded encouragingly. Together, they stepped out of the car and into what would become one of the most meaningful days of their lives. The people's Christmas was about to begin, and, with it, a new chapter in the story of a monarchy learning to open its heart to those it served. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky, casting a golden glow over the snow-covered grounds of Sandringham. Inside the East Wing, the sound of children's laughter was already beginning to echo through halls that had known too much solemnity for too long. William and Catherine exchanged a glance that said everything. This was what Christmas was meant to be. The grand entrance hall of Sandringham's East Wing had never seen such a mixture of awe and joy as when the first families stepped through its doors. 8-year-old Aisha Ahmed stood frozen in the doorway, her mouth forming a perfect O as she took in the magnificent Christmas tree that stretched nearly to the ceiling. Her younger brothers, Hassan and Omar, clung to their mother's coat, equally mesmerized by the twinkling lights and golden ornaments. William approached them with a warm smile, crouching down to meet the children at eye level. "Welcome to Sandringham," he said gently. "I'm William, and we're so glad you could join us for Christmas." Aisha's father, Rashid, looked uncomfortable, unsure of the proper protocol. Should he bow? Shake hands? William solved the dilemma by extending his hand naturally. "Mr. Ahmed, it's wonderful to finally meet you in person. Catherine has told me so much about your family." The tension in Rashid's shoulders eased slightly. "Your Highness, we are deeply honored." "Please," William interrupted kindly. "Today I'm just William. This is about celebrating Christmas together as friends." Catherine joined them, having finished greeting the O'Brien family. She immediately knelt beside Aisha, who was still staring at the tree in wonder. "It's quite something, isn't it?" she said conspirationally. "Would you like to know a secret?" Aisha nodded shyly. "There's a special ornament on that tree, just for your family. Later, we'll help you find it, and you can take it home to remember today." The little girl's eyes widened impossibly further. "Really? For us?" "Really," Catherine confirmed, her heart warming at the child's reaction. As more families arrived, the initial awkwardness began to melt away. The O'Brien twins, Jack and James, had quickly overcome their shyness and were examining every corner of the hall with the curiosity typical of 10-year-olds. Their father, Michael, watched them with a mixture of pride and sadness that Catherine recognized all too well, the look of a parent trying to be both mother and father. She approached him quietly. "They're wonderful boys," she said, following his gaze to where the twins were now chatting animatedly with Prince George, who had just arrived with his siblings. "They get that from their mother," Michael said softly, then caught himself. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." Never apologize for remembering someone you love, Catherine said gently. How long has it been? 2 years this February, Michael replied, his voice thick. The boys have been so brave, but Christmas is hard. Catherine touched his arm lightly. Then, let's make some new memories today. Happy ones that honor the past while celebrating the present. Meanwhile, William was deep in conversation with the Patel grandparents, who were raising their 3 grandchildren while their son served in the military overseas. Mrs. Patel was explaining the challenges of maintaining their cultural traditions while helping the children fit into British society. We want them to be proud of both heritages, she said, adjusting her colorful sari. But sometimes it feels like we're walking a tightrope. I think that's beautiful, William said sincerely. The richness of multiple traditions, multiple perspectives. It's something we could all learn from. Mr. Patel, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. You know, Your Highness, when we first came to England 40 years ago, we never imagined this. Being welcomed into a royal residence, being treated as equals. It means more than you know. William felt humbled. These people had overcome challenges he could barely imagine, had built lives of dignity and purpose against significant odds. And yet they were thanking him? As the morning progressed, the formal atmosphere completely dissolved. Children were running through the halls, their laughter mixing with traditional Christmas carols being played by a local youth orchestra Catherine had arranged. Parents were chatting over hot chocolate and mince pies, sharing stories, and finding common ground despite their different backgrounds. Catherine found a quiet moment to observe it all, standing near the great fireplace where a massive Yule log crackled warmly. This was what she and William had envisioned, not a stuffy royal reception, but a genuine gathering of families celebrating together. Mama, Mama, Princess Charlotte came running up, holding hands with Aisha Ahmed. Can Aisha come see my favorite ornament? Please. Catherine smiled at how quickly children could form friendships. Of course, darling. But remember to ask Mr. and Mrs. Ahmed first. As the 2 girls scampered off to find Aisha's parents, Catherine noticed someone standing alone near the window, a teenage boy from one of the families, looking uncomfortable and out of place. She recognized him from the files. Marcus Williams, 15 years old, from a single-parent household in Manchester. She approached him casually, not wanting to make him feel singled out. Not a fan of Christmas carols? She asked, noting how he went slightly at a particularly enthusiastic rendition of Good King Wenceslas. Marcus looked startled to be addressed by her directly. Oh, they're fine, Mrs. Mom. Catherine is fine, she said with a smile. And you're Marcus, right? Your mom mentioned you're quite the artist. The teenager's defensive posture relaxed slightly. She told you that. She's very proud of you. Said you've been accepted to a summer art program. Marcus nodded, then burst out, but I probably can't go. It's expensive, and Mom works so hard already. Catherine listened as the young man opened up about his dreams and fears, about feeling responsible for his younger siblings, about wanting more, but feeling guilty for wanting it. It was a conversation that reminded her why this initiative was so important. It wasn't just about one magical day, but about understanding the real lives and challenges of the people they served. Marcus, she said when he finally wound down, would you do me a favor? I'd love to see some of your artwork. And I happen to know there are several arts patronage programs that might be able to help with that summer program. Would you mind if I made some inquiries? The look of hope that dawned on the teenager's face was worth every protocol she was breaking. The morning activities were in full swing when William noticed something concerning. One of the younger children, a little boy named Tommy from the Morrison family, was sitting alone under the Christmas tree, tears streaming down his face. William immediately went to him, settling on the floor beside the child despite his formal attire. Hey there, Tommy, he said softly. What's wrong? The 5-year-old looked up with swimming eyes. I wanted to give Princess Charlotte a present, he hiccuped, but I don't have anything nice enough for a princess. William's heart melted. Can I tell you a secret, Tommy? The boy nodded. Princess Charlotte's favorite presents aren't the expensive ones. They're the ones that come from a heart. Do you know what she asked for this Christmas? Tommy shook his head. She asked for new friends. And look, you're here. You're already giving her exactly what she wanted. The boy's face brightened slightly. Really? Really? But if you want to make her something, I know where we keep the art supplies. Want to make her a special drawing. Soon, Tommy was happily ensconced at a table with crayons and paper, his tears forgotten. William watched him for a moment, then felt a hand slip into his. Catherine had observed the entire interaction. You're a wonderful father, she said quietly. I'll learn from the best, he replied, thinking of his own mother and how she would have loved this day. The midday feast was a carefully orchestrated blend of traditional British Christmas fare and dishes representing the various cultures of their guests. The Ahmed family had contributed a family recipe for lamb biryani. The Patels had brought homemade samosas, and the Caribbean British Foster family had prepared a spectacular rum cake, alcohol-free version for the children. William stood to say a few words before the meal, but found himself momentarily speechless as he looked around the table. Here were people from every walk of life, every background, every struggle, coming together in the spirit of Christmas. His carefully prepared remarks, suddenly, seemed inadequate. I had a speech prepared, he began, earning some nervous laughter. But, looking around this table, words seem insufficient. Each of you has a story. Each of you has faced challenges that have tested your strength, your faith, your hope. And yet here you are, still believing in the magic of Christmas, still teaching your children to believe. You honor us with your presence, not the other way around. He raised his glass of mulled cider. To family, both the ones we're born into and the ones we create. To courage in the face of adversity. And to the true spirit of Christmas, which lives not in palaces but in the hearts of people like you. The toast was met with applause and not a few tears. Even some of the staff, listening from the doorways, were dabbing at their eyes. The afternoon brought the highlight of the children's day, the arrival of Father Christmas himself. William had convinced one of his military friends, a jovial colonel with a natural white beard, to play the role. But this was no ordinary Santa visit. Each child received a gift that had been carefully chosen based on Catherine's conversations with their parents. Aisha, who loved reading, received a beautiful illustrated set of fairy tales from around the world. The O'Brien twins, passionate about football, got jerseys signed by their favorite players. William had called in some favors. Tommy Morrison, the little artist, opened a real artist set with wide eyes. But it was Marcus Williams' gift that brought the most emotional response. The teenager opened a professional quality sketchbook and set of pencils, along with a letter. Read it out loud, his mother encouraged. Marcus's voice shook as he read. Dear Marcus, your talent deserves to be nurtured. This letter confirms your full scholarship to the Summer Arts Institute, courtesy of the Royal Foundation's Youth Arts Program. Keep creating, keep dreaming. William and Catherine. The teenager broke down completely, hugging his mother as she cried with him. Around the room, there wasn't a dry eye to be found. How did you? Marcus's mother started to ask Catherine. I made some calls this morning, Catherine said simply. When you see talent like that, you don't let it go to waste. As the afternoon wore on, something magical happened. The barriers of class, culture, and circumstance seemed to dissolve entirely. The Patel grandchildren were teaching Prince George and Princess Charlotte a traditional Indian dance. The Ahmed boys were engaged in a spirited football discussion with the O'Brien twins. Parents were exchanging phone numbers, making plans to stay in touch. William found himself in the kitchen, helping to prepare hot chocolate for everyone. Mrs. Henderson, the head housekeeper, worked beside him, her usual formality forgotten. Your mother would be so proud, she said suddenly, then looked horrified at her boldness. I'm sorry, Your Highness, I shouldn't have. No, William said firmly. You're right. She would have loved this. She always said that the divide between the palace and the people was artificial, maintained by fear on both sides. Today feels like we've broken through that fear. Indeed, sir, if I may say so, you've given us all a gift today, staff included. Reminded us why service matters, why tradition should evolve. It's been too long since these halls heard children's laughter like this. As evening began to fall, The families gathered in the main hall for carols. But these weren't the formal, perfectly pitched performances usually associated with royal gatherings. These were families singing together, sometimes off-key, sometimes forgetting words, but always with joy. Little Aisha Ahmed stood up bravely to sing a song from her parents' homeland, her clear voice filling the ancient hall with a hauntingly beautiful melody. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. "My turn," Princess Charlotte announced, and proceeded to perform a very enthusiastic, if not entirely accurate, version of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, complete with dance moves. The evening was drawing to a close when Mr. O'Brien approached William. "I need to thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "This is the first time since my wife died that the boys have really smiled at Christmas. Really enjoyed it. You've given us hope that happiness is still possible." William gripped the man's shoulder. "You're doing an incredible job with those boys. They're lucky to have you. Some days I don't feel like it. Some days I can barely get out of bed. But days like this, they remind me why I keep trying." As the families prepared to leave, each was presented with a hamper of gifts to take home. Practical things like winter coats and boots for the children, vouchers for local shops, and special treats for Christmas morning. But more than that, each family left with photographs from the day, captured by the discreet photographer Catherine had arranged, and the promise that this was just the beginning. The Ahmed family was among the last to leave. As they gathered their things, Mrs. Ahmed approached Catherine with tears in her eyes. "When we came to this country, we left everything behind," she said softly. "Some days, I wonder if we made the right choice. But today, you made us feel like we belong here. Like this is truly home. How do we thank you for that?" Catherine embraced the woman warmly. "You just did. And remember, this isn't goodbye. We want to hear how Aisha's reading progresses, how the boys do in school. You're part of our extended family now." As the last car pulled away, William and Catherine stood in the doorway of Sandringham, watching the taillights disappear into the winter night. The hall behind them looked different somehow, still grand, but warmer, more lived in. The formal portraits on the walls seemed to smile down with approval. "We did it," Catherine said, leaning into her husband's warmth. "We did," William agreed. "But this is just the beginning. Next year, we do it bigger," Catherine finished. More families, maybe multiple locations. They were interrupted by George and Charlotte, who came running up, Louis toddling behind them. "Papa, can our new friend come back?" George asked eagerly. "Did you have fun today?" William asked, scooping up Louis while Catherine lifted Charlotte. "The best fun," Charlotte declared. "Aisha is my new best friend, and she's going to teach me her language. And Marcus is going to draw my portrait." George added, "He said I have good bone structure, whatever that means." William and Catherine exchanged amused glances over their children's heads. The day had been a success beyond their wildest dreams, but perhaps the greatest success was seeing their own children embrace the spirit of inclusion and friendship so naturally. Later that evening, after the children were in bed and the staff had finished cleaning up, William and Catherine sat by the fire in their private quarters, reviewing the day. William's phone had been buzzing constantly with messages from various family members and officials. "The Queen called it inspired," he reported, reading from his phone. Said it reminded her why the monarchy exists, to serve, not to be served. "And the press?" Catherine asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. William scrolled through several messages. Mixed, but more positive than negative. The photos of Charlotte and Aisha singing together seemed to have won over even some critics. One columnist called it the future of Britain, multicultural, inclusive, and united. Catherine picked up one of the ornaments that had been left behind, the Morrison families, which they would send on to them tomorrow. "Do you think we really made a difference today?" William set aside his phone and pulled her close. "I think we planted seeds. Some will grow quickly, like Marcus's scholarship. Others will take time, like the friendships formed, the barriers broken. But, yes, I think we made a difference." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire die down to embers. Outside, snow began to fall again, blanketing the world in fresh white possibility. "What was your favorite moment?" Catherine asked eventually. William considered. There were so many, but I think it was when Mrs. Patel was teaching Charlotte how to wrap a sari, and Charlotte said, "This is like dress up, but with history." The joy on Mrs. Patel's face, having her culture appreciated and celebrated rather than just tolerated. That's what today was really about. "Mine was watching you with Tommy," Catherine said. "The way you got down on his level made him feel heard and valued. You're going to be a wonderful king someday." "Someday," William agreed. "But today I was just happy to be a host, a friend, a fellow parent figuring it out as we go." As they prepared for bed, both felt the satisfying exhaustion that comes from a day well spent. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new criticisms, new protocols to navigate. But today had proven something important, that the bridge between palace and people wasn't as wide as everyone believed. It just took courage to cross it. In homes across Britain that night, 8 families were tucking their children into bed with hearts full of wonder and hope. Children were falling asleep, clutching new toys, and dreaming of princesses who were now friends. Parents were lying awake, marveling at a day that had shown them they were seen, valued, and included in the fabric of their nation. And in Sandringham, the ancient walls seemed to hold the echo of children's laughter, of carols sung with joy rather than precision, of barriers falling and hearts opening. The people's Christmas had been more than anyone had dared to hope, but it was also just the beginning of something larger, something transformative. William stood one last time at the window, looking out at the snow-covered grounds. Tomorrow, the formal Christmas celebrations would begin, with all their pomp and tradition. But they would be different this year, infused with the genuine warmth and connection of today. He thought of his mother, of how she had always insisted that royalty meant nothing without humanity. Today, they had honored that legacy. "Come to bed," Catherine called softly. "Tomorrow's a big day, too." William took one last look at the peaceful scene outside, then joined his wife. As he drifted off to sleep, he could hear the faint sound of church bells in the distance, welcoming Christmas with their ancient song. But in his dreams, he heard something else. The sound of children laughing, of families coming together, of hope renewed. It was, he thought as sleep claimed him, the most beautiful sound in the world. Christmas morning dawned crisp and clear over London, where the Ahmed family was just beginning to stir in their modest flat in Tower Hamlets. Aisha was the first awake, as she had been every Christmas morning since she could remember. But this year felt different. On her bedside table sat the ornament from Sandringham, a delicate silver star engraved with her family's name, catching the early morning light. She padded quietly to her parents' room, clutching the illustrated book of fairy tales she had received. Her mother was already awake, sitting by the window with a cup of tea, watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold and pink. "Mama," Aisha whispered, climbing into her mother's lap. "Was yesterday real?" Fatima Ahmed smiled, stroking her daughter's hair. "Very real, Habibdi. Look." She pointed to the kitchen table where the photographs from Sandringham were spread out. Aisha singing in the great hall, the boys playing football with princes, their whole family standing with William and Catherine like old friends. "Princess Charlotte said she wants to be pen pals," Aisha said, still hardly believing it. "She gave me her special stationery and everything." "Then you must write to her," her mother encouraged. "Real friendship doesn't care about palaces or flats, my dear. It cares about kind hearts." Across the city in Liverpool, the O'Brien household was experiencing its own Christmas miracle. Jack and James had woken their father at an ungodly hour, but for once, Michael O'Brien didn't mind. The boys' excitement was infectious, and more importantly, it was genuine happiness rather than the forced cheer they'd all been maintaining since their mother's death. "Dad, look." Jack held up the signed football jerseys. "Mohamed Salah actually wrote our names. And there's a note." Michael read the personal note from the Liverpool striker. "To Jack and James, William told me about 2 brave boys who never give up. That's the spirit of true champions. Keep playing, keep dreaming. YNWA." "You'll never walk alone," James whispered, the Liverpool motto taking on new meaning. "Dad, Prince William arranged this just for us?" Michael nodded, his throat tight. "He did. He and Catherine, they really listened when I told them about you, too. About how football helps us remember Mum, how she never missed a match. Can we frame these next to Mum's picture?" Jack asked. "I think she'd love that," Michael managed, pulling both boys into a fierce hug. The impact of the Sandringham gathering rippled far beyond the families who had attended. Photos and stories had begun to circulate, not through official channels, but through the authentic sharing of the families themselves. Mrs. Patel had posted pictures on her community Facebook page, writing eloquently about how the future king had sat on the floor to play with her grandchildren, how the princess had asked for her samosa recipe. The post went viral within hours. Comments poured in from around the world, people sharing their own stories of feeling excluded from national celebrations, of wondering if they truly belonged. The hashtag People's Christmas began trending, with thousands sharing what inclusive celebration meant to them. At Sandringham, William woke to find his phone flooded with messages. But among the official communications and media requests, one stood out, a text from Marcus Williams with a photo attached. The teenager had stayed up all night, creating a sketch of the gathering, capturing not just the faces but the spirit of the day. Every detail was perfect, from Charlotte's animated storytelling to the quiet moment of connection between William and little Tommy. "Catherine, look at this," William said, showing her the drawing. "He's extraordinary." Catherine studied the sketch with an artist's eye. "This belongs in a gallery. The way he's captured the light, the emotions. William, we need to make sure he gets to that summer program." "Already done," William reminded her with a smile. "But I think we should do more. Commission him for an official portrait of the day, perhaps. Pay him properly. Give him that validation." "Brilliant," Catherine agreed. "I'll call him later. But first," she gestured to where their own children were beginning to stir. "Our own Christmas chaos awaits." The traditional royal family Christmas proceeded as it had for generations. Church service, formal lunch, the Queen's speech. But there were subtle differences this year. During the church service, William found his mind drifting to the Ahmed family, wondering if they were celebrating in their own way. When the Queen's speech mentioned the importance of opening our doors and our hearts to all who make Britain their home, he caught his grandmother's eye and saw the tiny nod of approval. The real change, however, came after the formal celebrations. William and Catherine had arranged for each of the Sandringham families to receive a personal video message from them on Christmas Day. They had recorded them in the early hours of the morning, wanting each family to know they were still in their thoughts. For the Morrison family, who had seemed the most overwhelmed by the grandeur, the message was especially warm. "Tommy," William said in the video, "I hope you're enjoying your art supplies. Charlotte has your drawing on her wall. She says it's better than any royal portrait." The 5-year-old, watching on his mother's phone, beamed with pride and immediately ran to get paper to draw another picture for the princess. The Foster family, who had brought such joy with their Caribbean traditions and music, received a message where Catherine attempted a few words in patois, making the grandmother laugh with delight at her earnest effort. "You bringing the sunshine to our British Christmas," Catherine said, her attempt at the accent making the whole family giggle with appreciation rather than mockery. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from an unexpected source. Dr. Sarah Chun, a child psychologist who had worked with several of the invited families through various support programs, wrote an open letter to The Guardian about the profound impact of the initiative. "What their Royal Highnesses have done goes beyond charity," she wrote. "They've modeled radical inclusion. Children who have experienced trauma, displacement, or loss were given not pity, but dignity. They weren't helped, they were welcomed." The psychological impact of this cannot be overstated. When a future king tells a refugee child that Britain is lucky to have them, when a princess learns traditional dances from immigrant grandparents, it reshapes how these children see their place in society. The letter sparked a national conversation about inclusion, identity, and what it meant to be British in the modern age. Radio shows devoted hours to discussing the topic, with callers sharing their own experiences of feeling outside the mainstream celebration of national holidays. On Boxing Day, something unexpected happened. William and Catherine received a call from Rashid Ahmed. His voice was tense with worry. "Your Highness, I'm so sorry to bother you, but Aisha, she's in the hospital. She had an asthma attack, a bad one. She keeps asking for Princess Charlotte, and I didn't know." Without hesitation, William and Catherine bundled their children into the car and drove to the London hospital where Aisha had been admitted. They arrived to find the little girl pale and struggling to breathe, hooked up to various monitors, and clearly frightened. Charlotte, showing maturity beyond her years, went straight to her new friend's bedside. "Aisha, I brought you something." She produced a small teddy bear wearing a crown. "This is Sir Cuddles. He helps me when I'm scared. He can help you too." Aisha's eyes lit up, her breathing seeming to ease slightly just from the distraction. Catherine spoke quietly with the doctors while William sat with the Ahmed parents, who were overwhelmed by the royal family's presence. "You didn't have to come," Fatima said, tears streaming down her face. "When nobody's special." "You're wrong," William said firmly. "You're friends. This is what friends do." They stayed for 2 hours, Charlotte reading stories to Aisha, mostly making them up based on the pictures, George entertaining Hassan, and Omar in the waiting room. Even little Louis toddling around bringing smiles to the tired faces of other families in the ward. The hospital visit, unplanned and unannounced to the media, somehow made more of an impact than any official engagement could have. A nurse's quickly snapped photo of Charlotte holding Aisha's hand while she used her inhaler became one of the most shared images of the year. But, more importantly, it cemented relationships that went beyond a single-day celebration. As a new year approached, the momentum from the people's Christmas continued to build. Other members of the royal family began reaching out, wanting to create similar initiatives. Prince Edward proposed opening up royal venues for community celebrations throughout the year. Princess and typically traditional suggested skills workshops at royal estates for disadvantaged youth. The Prime Minister himself called William, expressing interest in making the people's Christmas a national initiative. "What you've started here," he said, "it's what we need, not just at Christmas but year-round, breaking down barriers, building understanding." William was careful in his response. "It can't become politicized," he insisted. "The moment it becomes about photo ops or votes, it loses its authenticity. These families trusted us. We can't betray that trust." In the Foster household, Grandmother Hyacinth was holding court with her church group, showing off the photos from Sandringham. But it wasn't the grandeur she emphasized, it was the small moments. William helping her grandson with his reading. Catherine asking for her jerk chicken recipe and actually writing it down. The way they had made sure there were foods everyone could eat, respecting dietary restrictions without making anyone feel different. Them royals, they could have just handed out presents and called it charity, she said in her melodious voice. But they sat with us, ate with us, listened to our stories. That Catherine, she even asked about my arthritis, remembered I mentioned it in one conversation months before. You know what that means? They see us as people, not projects. The ripple effects continued in unexpected ways. Marcus Williams' art teacher reported a complete transformation in the young man's confidence. Not only was he preparing for the Summer Institute, but he had started a project documenting the diverse families in his Manchester neighborhood, inspired by his Sandringham sketch. He told me, the teacher shared in an interview, that Prince William's set art could change how people see the world. Marcus took that to heart. He's using his talent to show the beauty in ordinary lives, the extraordinary in what others might overlook. The O'Brien twins' football coach noticed changes too. The boys who had been withdrawn since their mother's death were now organizing charity matches, wanting to do what William and Catherine did, make people feel included. Their father, Michael, had started a support group for single fathers, inspired by how understood he had felt at Sandringham. "They made me realize I wasn't alone," he said at the first meeting. "Not just in practical terms, but emotionally. Prince William talked to me father to father about the challenges, the doubts, the small victories. If the future king can admit he sometimes doesn't know what he's doing as a parent, maybe it's okay that I don't either." As January progressed, William and Catherine began planning for the next year. The response had been overwhelming, thousands of applications from families wanting to participate, offers of venues from heritage sites across the country, even international interest from other royal families wanting to implement similar programs. But they were careful not to let it become too big too fast. The magic was in the intimacy, Catherine insisted during one planning meeting. Yes, we want to reach more families, but not at the cost of genuine connection. They decided on a model of multiple smaller gatherings throughout the year, each focused on different communities or challenges. A spring celebration for young carers, a summer gathering for refugee families, an autumn event for families dealing with disability. Each would maintain the personal touch that had made the First People's Christmas so special. The Patel grandparents had become unofficial ambassadors for the initiative in their community. They spoke at temples and community centers about their experience, but always with the same message. It wasn't about meeting royalty. It was about being seen, being valued, being part of the bigger story of this country. Their grandson, Arjun, had started corresponding with Prince George, bonding over their shared love of aviation. The boys exchanged drawings of airplanes and dreams of becoming pilots. It was exactly the kind of natural friendship that William and Catherine had hoped would emerge. One snowy evening in late January, Catherine was reading through letters from the Christmas families when she came across one that made her call William immediately. "Listen to this," she said, reading from Fatima Ahmed's elegant handwriting. "Your Highnesses, I wanted you to know that Aisha has been accepted to a gifted program at a prestigious school. When they asked her in the interview what gave her confidence to apply, she said, 'Princess Charlotte believes in me, and she's going to be queen someday, so she must know what she's talking about.'" William laughed, but his eyes were misty. "Out of the mouths of babes," he said. "Sometimes I think the children understand what we're trying to do better than the adults." The letter continued, "But more than that, you've given our whole family permission to dream bigger. My husband is applying for a promotion he never thought he deserved. I'm returning to university to finish my degree. You showed us we belong here, that this country is as much ours as anyone's. How do we thank you for giving us back our confidence?" "We don't need thanks," Catherine said softly. "Seeing them thrive is everything." As winter turned toward spring, the impact of the people's Christmas continued to reveal itself in ways both large and small. The Marcus Williams sketch had indeed been displayed in a gallery, with the proceeds going to youth arts programs. The O'Brien twins charity football match had raised thousands for grieving families. Aisha Ahmed was excelling in her new school, her confidence blooming like the spring flowers. But perhaps the most significant change was in how these families now moved through the world. They walked a little taller, spoke a little louder, dreamed a little bigger. They had been seen by the highest levels of society, not as charity cases, but as valued members of the community. In Parliament, debates about immigration and social services now often reference the people's Christmas. "If our future king can see the contribution these families make," one MP argued, "if our princess can learn from their traditions, perhaps it's time we all open our eyes." William and Catherine watched these developments with satisfaction, but also humility. They had simply opened a door. It was the families themselves who had walked through it and shown the nation what lay on the other side. One afternoon, as they prepared for the spring Young Carers event, William found Catherine in her office, surrounded by photos and letters from the Christmas families. She was creating a scrapbook, documenting not just the day, but its aftermath. "For our children," she explained. "So they remember that leadership isn't about being served, but about serving. That privilege comes with responsibility. That the true magic of Christmas, or any day, is in connection, not ceremony." William sat beside her, looking through the images. There was Tommy Morrison's second drawing, even better than the first. The Ahmed family at Aisha's school award ceremony. The O'Brien twins with their charity match trophy. Marcus at his gallery opening. The Foster family at their church's inclusive Christmas service, inspired by Sandringham. The Patels teaching traditional cooking to their neighbors. "We did something good," he said quietly. "We started something good." Catherine corrected. The families did the rest. They took a single day of inclusion and turned it into a movement of belonging. As spring arrived in earnest, bringing with it new challenges and opportunities, the legacy of that snowy December day continued to grow. Schools began implementing inclusion programs inspired by the photos of Charlotte and Aisha. Community centers started cultural exchange events modeled on the Sandringham Gathering. Even corporate organizations began rethinking their approach to diversity, moving from tolerance to genuine celebration. The Queen, in a rare personal comment, told William she had never been prouder. "You've shown that the monarchy can evolve without losing its essence," she said. "Your mother would be so pleased." But the truest measure of success came in the small moments. When Aisha wrote excitedly to Charlotte about making friends with a Syrian girl at her new school, "Just like you made friends with me." When the O'Brien twins' father sent a photo of them teaching their late mother's favorite songs to other children who had lost parents. When Marcus's art began showing up in unexpected places, spreading its message of beauty and diversity. As Catherine often said when asked about the initiative's impact, "We didn't change these families' lives. We simply recognized what was already there, their strength, their value, their belonging." Sometimes that's all any of us need, someone to see us, truly see us, and say you matter. You're part of us. Welcome home. The People's Christmas had become more than an event. It had become a promise that in modern Britain, there was room at the table for everyone, that diversity was not just tolerated but celebrated, that the future belonged to all who called the nation home. And in making that promise, William and Catherine had not just preserved the monarchy's relevance. They had redefined its very purpose for a new generation. 6 months had passed since the first People's Christmas, and the warmth of that December day had blossomed into a movement that neither William nor Catherine could have fully anticipated. As summer painted the British countryside in vibrant greens and golds, Sandringham was preparing to host its second gathering. This time for young carers, children who spent their days looking after sick or disabled family members. Catherine stood in the same hall where it had all begun, but now it looked different. The Christmas decorations had given way to summer flowers, donated by local gardens. Photos from the first event lined the walls. Not formal portraits, but candid moments of connection and joy. She touched one gently. Charlotte and Aisha singing together, their faces alight with innocent friendship. "They're starting to arrive," Williams said, joining her. He was dressed casually, having learned from the first event that formality could be a barrier. "Are you ready?" Catherine nodded, though her heart was already aching for these children who carried such adult responsibilities. "The Johnsons are here first. Remember Sophie? 14 years old, caring for her mother with MS and her younger brother with autism." They walked out together to greet the families, and William was immediately struck by how different these children seemed from those at Christmas. There was a maturity in their eyes, a weariness that no child should carry. Sophie Johnson stood protectively near her mother's wheelchair, scanning the environment for potential challenges, her hand resting reassuringly on her brother Daniel's shoulder as he rocked slightly, overwhelmed by the new surroundings. "Sophie," Catherine said warmly, crouching to be at eye level with the girl. "We're so glad you're here. And this must be Daniel." The boy didn't make eye contact, but Sophie answered for him. "He's a bit anxious. New places are hard for him." "Then, let's make it easier," Williams said. He pulled out a small tablet showing photos of all the rooms they'd be using. "Daniel, would you like to see pictures of where we'll be today? Then, nothing will be a surprise." It was a small gesture, but Sophie's shoulders visibly relaxed. Someone understood. Someone had thought about her brother's needs in advance. As more families arrived, the gathering took on its own unique character. These weren't just children who needed a magical day out. They were children who rarely got to be children at all. The youngest carer was just 8 years old, helping look after a father who had lost both legs in Afghanistan. The oldest was 17, who had been caring for his grandmother with dementia since he was 12. William watched as these young carers instinctively helped each other, noticing needs before they were expressed. When one mother had a seizure, 3 children immediately moved to help. knowing exactly what to do, while Catherine comforted the woman's daughter, who was embarrassed by the attention. "It's okay," the girl said, trying to brush off concern. "It happens all the time. I'm used to it." "But you shouldn't have to be," Catherine said gently. "Today, let us take care of things. Let's take care of you." The day's activities had been carefully planned with the help of young carer organizations. Unlike the Christmas celebration, this wasn't about magic and wonder, it was about respite and recognition. There were therapy animals for the children to interact with, professional photographers to take family portraits. Many families had no recent photos together, and quiet spaces for those who needed breaks. But the most powerful moment came during lunch when William stood to speak. He had struggled with what to say to these children who knew more about sacrifice than most adults. "I'm not going to tell you you're brave," he began, "because I'm sure you hear that all the time, and I bet sometimes you don't feel brave at all. Sometimes you probably feel scared, or angry, or just tired, and that's okay." Several of the young carers looked up in surprise. Adults usually told them how strong they were, how proud everyone was. No one usually acknowledged the harder feelings. "What I want to tell you," William continued, "is that you're seen. Your sacrifice, your love, your struggles, we see them. And while we can't take away the challenges you face, we can make sure you don't face them alone anymore." Catherine then announced the real purpose of the gathering, the launch of a comprehensive support program for young carers, funded by the Royal Foundation. Not just occasional respite days, but ongoing support, counseling, educational assistance, emergency respite care, and a network connecting young carers across the country. "You've been caring for others," she said. "Now let others care for you too." The response was overwhelming. Sophie Johnson burst into tears, the first time she'd allowed herself to cry in years. The 8-year-old carer climbed into her father's lap, finally able to be a little girl again. The 17-year-old boy who'd been caring for his grandmother simply said, "Thank you for seeing us." As the Young Carers event unfolded, miles away in London, another story was developing. Marcus Williams was standing in front of a canvas larger than any he'd ever worked with before, in a studio he could never have imagined accessing 6 months ago. The Royal Academy had offered him a special placement after seeing his Sandringham sketch, and now he was working on his most ambitious project yet. "It's going to be displayed in the National Gallery," his mentor explained. "A contemporary piece among the classics." "What's your vision?" Marcus stepped back, studying his preliminary sketches. "I want to show modern Britain," he said. "Not the Britain people think they know, but the real one. The one where refugee families celebrate Christmas with princes, where single fathers are heroes, where grandparents preserve culture while embracing change." His phone buzzed with a message from Prince William. "Heard about the National Gallery Commission. Brilliant. Can't wait to see how you capture our story." Our story. Not the royal story, not Marcus's story, but something shared. That simple pronoun meant everything. Back at Sandringham, the young carers were experiencing something many had never had, a day where they were just kids. Professional carers had been brought in to look after their family members, allowing the young people to fully relax for perhaps the first time in years. George and Charlotte, who had joined the event, were playing with the other children, and the differences that might have divided them seemed to disappear. Charlotte was particularly drawn to a quiet girl named Emma, who cared for her younger siblings while her single mother battled cancer. "Do you want to see my secret garden?" Charlotte asked. It wasn't really secret, just a corner of the Sandringham grounds that she'd claimed as her own, but to share it felt like offering something precious. As the two girls wandered off hand in hand, William reflected on how naturally his children had embraced this new reality. For them, playing with young carers or refugee children wasn't an act of charity. It was simply friendship. The day included workshops where the young carers could share their experiences with each other, facilitated by professional counselors. The stories that emerged were heartbreaking, but also inspiring. Children who had learned to inject insulin before they could properly tie their shoes. Teenagers who had missed school to care for parents, but taught themselves from library books. 8-year-olds who could recognize the signs of various medical emergencies better than many adults. "What's the hardest part?" the counselor asked during one session. When people say I'm lucky to spend so much time with my mom, one boy answered, like I wouldn't rather be playing football while she was healthy. The loneliness, Sophie Johnson added. My friends don't understand why I can't go to parties or sleepovers. Eventually, they stop asking. William, observing from the doorway, felt his heart constrict. These children were paying a price for their love that no child should have to pay. But the program launching today would change that, creating networks of support, providing respite, ensuring education didn't suffer. As afternoon gave way to evening, something beautiful happened. The young carers, finally given permission to be children, truly let go. They ran through the gardens, played games, laughed with an abandon many hadn't felt in years. Their family members, watching from comfortable seats with proper care support, wept to see their children simply being young. Catherine found herself sitting with Daniel Johnson, Sophie's autistic brother, who had initially been so anxious. He was drawing with intense concentration, and she was amazed to see he was capturing the day in his own unique way. Not realistic representations, but emotional impressions, colors, and shapes that somehow conveyed feeling better than any photograph. Daniel, this is wonderful, she said softly. You're an artist like Marcus. He glanced at her briefly, then returned to his drawing, but she saw the small smile that crossed his face. Later, Sophie would tell her it was the first time Daniel had smiled in weeks. The impact of the Young Carers event rippled outward, just as the Christmas gathering had. Media coverage focused not on the royal involvement, but on the young people themselves, their stories finally being told with dignity and respect. A documentary filmmaker approached several families about creating a series that would show the reality of young carers' lives, with profits going to support programs. Most importantly, the infrastructure Catherine had announced began rolling out immediately. Within weeks, young carers across the country were accessing support they'd never had before. Sophie Johnson returned to full-time education with tutors, helping her catch up on missed work. The 8-year-old, caring for her veteran father, got respite care that allowed her to join a dance class she'd been longing to attend. One evening in late July, William received a call that would reshape the entire initiative once again. It was from the Prime Minister. Your Highness, I'll be direct. What you started has captured something essential about who we are as a nation. I want to propose making this official, a national program of inclusion and support with royal patronage but government backing. We're calling it the Unity Initiative. William was cautious. As I said before, Prime Minister, this can't become political. Agreed. That's why we need your involvement. To keep it above politics, focused on people. We're proposing a nonpartisan commission, co-chaired by you and the Duchess, with representatives from all parties and communities. After much discussion with Catherine and their advisors, they agreed, but with strict conditions. The focus would remain on individual families and genuine connection. No family would ever be used for political photo opportunities. The initiative would be measured not by publicity generated, but by lives genuinely improved. As summer turned to autumn, the Third People's Gathering was held, this time for families dealing with disability. The event was held at Windsor Castle, made fully accessible for the first time in its 1,000-year history. Ramps were installed, sign language interpreters were present, sensory rooms were created for those who needed them. The Sharma family, whose daughter Priya had cerebral palsy, had never imagined they would visit a royal residence. Most historic sites were inaccessible to Priya's wheelchair. But here she was, rolling through rooms where kings and queens had walked, her eyes bright with excitement. She wants to be a historian, Mrs. Sharma told William. But so many historical sites are closed to her. Today you've shown her that history belongs to her too. Prince George pushed Priya's wheelchair personally as they toured the castle, the two children chatting animatedly about knights and dragons. When they reached the ancient throne room, George had an idea. Would you like to sit on the throne? He asked Priya. I'm not supposed to, but I bet Gran wouldn't mind if you did. The image of Priya, beaming from the royal throne with George standing beside her like a proud knight, became one of the defining photographs of the Unity Initiative. But more than a photograph, it was a statement. This country, this history, this future belong to everyone. The autumn gathering also saw the return of the original Christmas families. The Ahmeds, the O'Briens, the Patels, and others came not as guests, but as mentors to the new families, showing them the ropes, sharing their experiences, proving that this was not a one-time kindness, but an ongoing relationship. Marcus Williams, now preparing for art college with a full scholarship, set up an art station where children with various disabilities could express themselves through painting. His gentle encouragement of a boy with Down syndrome, helping him create his first painting, brought tears to many eyes. "You taught me art matters," Marcus told William. "Now I get to pass that on." The O'Brien twins had started a football league for children who had lost parents, with Michael coaching not just soccer, but life skills. "William showed me that being a single dad didn't make me less of a father," he explained to a reporter. "Now I help other dads see that too." As the first anniversary of the original People's Christmas approached, Catherine was in her office planning something special when Charlotte burst in. "Mummy, Aisha wrote again. She says her whole class wants to do something for Christmas like we did. Can they?" Catherine read the letter, written in Aisha's increasingly confident hand. The girl who had once been too shy to speak was now organizing her classmates to visit elderly care homes during the holidays, inspired by how welcome she had felt at Sandringham. "Of course they can," Catherine said. "In fact, why don't we help them?" This sparked an idea that would become the Children's Christmas Corps, young people across the country organizing their own inclusion initiatives supported by the Unity program. By December, thousands of children were involved, visiting care homes, organizing toy drives, creating art for hospitals, learning that service and connection were not duties but joys. The Anniversary People's Christmas was held simultaneously in multiple locations across the country. Sandringham, Windsor, Holyrood Palace in Scotland, Hillsborough Castle in Northern Ireland, and Cardiff Castle in Wales all opened their doors. The royal family split up to host different venues, but technology allowed them to connect throughout the day, creating a true sense of national celebration. At Sandringham, William welcomed a new group of families, but also many familiar faces. The Ahmed family was there, Aisha now, confidently helping newer children feel comfortable. Sophie Johnson, looking healthier and happier than 6 months ago, was mentoring other young carers. Marcus Williams was documenting everything, preparing for his biggest exhibition yet. "Look how far we've come," Catherine said to William as they watched the grand hall fill with laughter and languages from around the world. "From one uncertain experiment to this." "This is just the beginning," William replied. "Imagine next year, and the year after. Imagine when George is king, and this is simply how things are done. No longer special, just normal." That evening, as snow began to fall, just as it had a year ago, the gatherings across the country linked by video for a moment of unity. Thousands of voices from palace halls and community centers from every background imaginable joined in singing Silent Night. But the words took on new meaning. This was not about one holy night, but about finding the holy in every encounter, the sacred in every connection. The Queen, watching from Windsor, was visibly moved. In her Christmas broadcast that year, she would say, "My grandson and his wife have reminded us all of a simple truth, that a nation is not made of subjects and sovereigns, but of neighbors. The people's Christmas has become the people's year, and Britain is stronger for it." As the celebrations wound down and families prepared to leave, many lingered, not wanting the magic to end. But that was the beautiful truth they had all discovered. The magic didn't end when they left the palace. They carried it with them, spreading it in their communities, their schools, their daily lives. Little Tommy Morrison, now 6 and even more artistic than before, presented William with a painting. It showed a castle with its doors wide open and people of every description streaming in and out, but the clever part was that you couldn't tell who was royal and who wasn't. Everyone wore crowns of light. "This is what you did," Tommy explained seriously. "You made everyone royal." William knelt beside the boy, deeply moved. "No, Tommy. We just helped everyone remember they always were." As the last car pulled away from Sandringham that night, William and Catherine stood once again in the doorway, snow swirling around them. But this time they weren't alone. Hundreds of volunteers, staff who had become friends, local community members who had embraced the initiative stood with them. You know what the best part is? Catherine said, leaning into her husband's warmth. This doesn't depend on us anymore. It's bigger than us. It will outlast us. William nodded, thinking of the network of connections now spreading across the country. Refugee families mentoring new arrivals. Young carers supporting each other. Artists like Marcus inspiring others to find their voice. Single parents like Michael creating communities of support. Grandparents like the Patels bridging cultural divides. Mummy, Papa. Charlotte's voice rang out. Look, she was pointing to the sky where the snow clouds had parted, revealing a stunning display of stars. But it wasn't the celestial beauty that had caught her attention. It was the fact that Aisha had taught her the Arabic names for some constellations, and now she could share two traditions at once. That's Thurea, Charlotte said proudly, pointing to the